Not Just Insurance podcast. My name's Jeff Safaya with my co-host Kevin Molnaric. And it's pretty exciting for today because here's the thing. Never have met this guy in person, but he's one of those agents where the last two conferences I've been to, Kevin, this is what happens. I'm hanging out with my, let's just say Allstate friends, and he'll be like, hey, look, it's Andrew Filar. I'm like, who's Andrew Filar? They're like, you don't know who Andrew Filar is? Right? Because I haven't been to Allstate event in a while. It's been a while. So I'm like, no, I'd love to meet him. And the conference has been so busy, you're not able to meet. And so I reached out to him on social media. We're happy he's on the show today. Man, you've had some really good success, and we want to share that success with our listeners. We have so many agents using our platform and listening on the podcast. So first off, thanks for joining us, and we want to hear your story, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And, I know what those events are like. Sometimes it can feel pretty overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
You're just trying to say hi to everybody and there's so many people. And, but what I'll say is if anybody ever says, like, oh, hey, please come talk to me. Like, I'm not one of those people that hates to be approached. So I try to be pretty affable and amiable and open to talking to whoever. So, yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And the cool thing is, just by being able to share, you wouldn't even accept the invitation if you weren't willing to help other agents.
For sure.
And that's it from the get-go. And I totally get that. Just being, so many people are just afraid to walk up and enter in a conversation. And a lot of times, you're probably available and people staying away. And, I get that. So, I'd like to even go back prior to even in insurance, because there's always that story behind the story, like as far back as you want to go. And, give us a little snippet of, were you big in sports? Like that competitive spirit, like where'd you get it from?
And let me chime in real quick. I was checking out your LinkedIn. I think you went to Florida Gulf Coast. His son has committed to Florida Gulf Coast.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Side note.
Yeah, go Eagles.
Yeah, next year. He's a senior now.
I love it. Honestly, it's a beautiful campus. It was a great college experience. Did my master's at Georgia Tech, and two very, very different campus vibes, but both amazing in their own right. So I think your son's going to be super happy down there in Fort Myers. It's a great place to live.
Yeah. And we fly in there 6-7 times a year. We have a home in Marco Island. So we're
beautiful.
So used to it, and 45 minutes away. And so, yeah, really
surprise,
excited.
Gabe, we're here.
Yeah, right. But we're here to not talk about, let's talk about you and your background.
Sure. So I'll go back to, I think I won't go to super in the weeds. If I go back to, maybe like middle school and high school, right? I think people sometimes are like, oh, like Andrew, it seems like he's always learning. He's always doing this. He's always doing that. And I'll just be honest, that didn't happen until I was in college. And I was a huge slacker as a student, and I don't really know why. I'm sure that if I sat down and reflected on it, and probably should, why I was such a slacker, but I skipped school a lot. I rarely made it to first or second period. I'm not a morning person. I kind of joke that the reason that I have to be an entrepreneur is because I can't work the corporate, 8:30 to 5 schedule. Naturally I want to wake up around 9, mosey around for an hour or two, go to the gym, and then really do a bunch of work from 1 p.m. to 7 or 8 p.m. And so, I think that has probably part to do with it, is just the schedule. But I didn't play sports. I wish my parents would have got me into it, but they were just kind of like, yeah, we're going to let Andrew do whatever he wants to do. So of course, as a teenager, I was like,
sure,
I'm going to take naps and hang out with my friends and play video games. And, I think that actually worked out pretty well because, until I had a car, obviously your whole world changes when you get a car. You're stuck in the house, and I had a rule that I had to be home by sundown. So, it's like, what do you do in the house? And so I played a lot of video games, and I played basically massively multiplayer online video games. And I think that is where I really learned about business in general. And I used to play it with my uncle, who, was a bachelor at the time, was single, in his 40s, also loved the game. And I'll never forget, the thing that we loved to do the most in the video game was to make money. We didn't even really like to play the game. We just liked to play to make money, and we would run arbitrage all the time. So we realized that you could buy some virtual good over here,
right,
and then store it, drop the supply, or drive the price up, and then flip it. And we just loved it, and we just had a ton of fun. And I think that crafted a lot of my outlook on business and how markets move and how multiple players in a dynamic environment can impact things. And business is really no different, right? It's just you have this virtual in-game economy that, is not one-to-one with the world economy, but it acts in a lot of the same ways, and people are people, human nature is that. So did a lot of that in high school. And then when I went off to college, I remember my dad said, look, you've got a little bit of money here, certainly not enough to pay for all of college. He's like, you might have to take some loans. And he's like, look, dude, he's like, you haven't been the best student. He's like, I know you haven't been the best student. Like, but if you fail a class, you're gonna have to pay to take it again. And so it's all on you. And so I started to take it a lot more seriously. Decided I was going to go to business school and didn't know what I wanted to do, but I really was just like, look, give me for lack of a better term, give me the sexiest sounding degree in the business school I can get, which was finance. And so I got a finance degree and didn't even want to work in finance. I thought numbers were cool, thought making money was cool, but I did not want to work in finance. Had some friends who had done it. They had moved to New York, were working 100-hour weeks. And I was like, that's just not for me. I just don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And I had a buddy who came to me and said, look, I work at State Farm and my boss is hiring. I think you'd be really good at it. And I said, okay. That was it. No questions asked. I said, okay. I was serving tables at the time. And down there in Fort Myers, Naples, there's a ton of country clubs. And so the general strategy, if you're a college student down there, is to go get a job at a country club, because not only do they pay you, $8 to $10 an hour as a server, you're not getting paid $3.25, but a lot of these places have automatic gratuity of 20%. The average meal price is $25 to $30. Right. And so you can make absurd amounts of money as a server being a college student, and it's seasonal. So you get summers off. And so I knew that I was making great money, but I needed to get some type of quote unquote office job, or, I don't know, white collar job for lack of a better term. And so I said, sure, I'll take the job. Not going to quit my server job. And so I get in, I get hired by a State Farm agent. And I'm like, cool, what am I going to do? I didn't even really care what I was going to do. They're like, you're going to do sales. I'm like, awesome, going to sell. I do that, at serving tables.
Right.
Turns out what I was actually going to do was I was actually going to cold call businesses, in the area to try and get them to allow us to quote their commercial auto insurance.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's how I got my start, and sucked. I hated it. I sucked at it, and the goal was to get 3 to 5, quotes a day. And then you would hand that information over to somebody who was licensed, and they would work up the quote, try to close it for you. And you would get credit for it if it came from your lead. And I remember putting up a goose egg like 3 months in a row. And I was like, I'm going to get fired. Didn't get fired. I think that's just because at the time, either my boss, the optimist in me says he saw something in me. The pessimist in me is like, well, he wasn't in the office, so maybe he didn't even really know or care. And I was only getting paid like $10 an hour or something like that, so I was pretty cheap. And I eventually started to get good at it. I hated it for a while, like I said, but I said, look, I'm 21 years old. Maybe I was 22, and I'll give it a year. And if after a year I hate it, I'll quit. But I'm not going to quit until I get a year in. And I was tempted a few times. I had been given job offers that got paid much better bases, benefits, because at the time, $10 an hour, no benefits. And I said, nope, I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to do it for a year. And at around month 4 or 5, I started to get some traction. And then around month 7 or 8, I got my license and started, once I got my license, I was able to work, the paid internet leads. And so I started to do that. And I started to realize that calling on an internet lead was so easy compared to calling on a business where they had nothing. And so, as I moved forward in my career, I eventually left, went to go work for the largest Allstate agency in the country, where I took them from an inbound sales process to an outbound sales process. And it was at that moment that I realized people said, look, it's so hard to call these internet leads. They don't want to talk to you. And that was a light bulb for me, because in my mind, I thought it was so easy, because my comparison point was calling on a business, trying to get past a gatekeeper, trying to get them to give me the driver's names, dates of birth, the year, make, and models. We didn't have all this pre-fill back then that we do today. And I realized that hard is relative, challenging is relative, and that where your starting point is compared to where you are today can drastically change what your outlook is on what's hard. And so did that, worked for that agent. for 8 years from 2015 to the end of 2022.
All right, we got to
And
pause
people
for
are
a
always,
little bit. You guys, you're just running. There's so much here.
yeah. And people always get really confused because they're like, I thought you opened your agency 5 years ago, which I did open my agency 5 years ago. And so people will say, well, how does that work? You work for this guy from 2018 to 2022. And I said, yes, I did both at the same time. And so I ran his Allstate agency down in Florida, was about a $70 million book. And then I opened my agency scratch up in 2018, on July 1st, 2018, and ran both for about 5 years together. And so luckily I did not do it alone. I had some business partners, but it was basically kind of like working 2 jobs at once. And by the end of last year, right before I left, we shared some operational staff and basically ran them as one, what we called like mega agent. So we were about 100 million combined,
Sure.
100 employees, and that's the story. So at the end of last year, we broke off from that agent, went it alone, launched Next Call Club, which is like our consulting and business services arm. And, we're a year into that today. And so that kind of brings us to now, and I can extrapolate or expand on anything that we talked about, or we can go a completely different direction.
Talk
So
about
good.
vision.
Yeah, we're definitely hit on that. But going back, thanks for being so raw. Like, not many people would say,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
just wasn't good in school and I got bad grades. And maybe it's probably a
It's
little too far.
relatable to me.
I
at
did,
least.
But like,
I did get bad grades. Yeah, I
Yeah.
did
but
get
it's
bad grades.
like who you are, and then how you learn business, and to tie that back to
Video games.
the video games. I've never heard that, but it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think I can relate to it. I think in my career where I just wanted to win. I didn't do it to make money. Like, I wanted to win. And you tell people that I think if you go after the money, it doesn't work. You have to want to win. And I think that maybe
For sure.
not putting words in your mouth, but that was impactful there. And then I love the fact that what you thought was hard in somebody else totally different, because you started in something so much harder. And for
It was brutal.
sure, like at 22, to call a business owner, to even get them on the phone must have been challenge number 1. And then you're selling something that you don't know that much about, especially when you're beginning.
I knew nothing about it. I'll never forget to this point. I remember somebody's like, hey, does my auto insurance cover me in Mexico? And I had a buddy who worked at State Farm. And he said, look, dude, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. Fake it till you make it. And I was like, okay, awesome. I'm going to fake it till you make it. So this guy's like, does my car cover me in Mexico? And I said, yeah. It covers you in Mexico. And I'll never forget my boss calling me and he goes, did you just tell someone that their car is covered in Mexico? Yeah. He said, is it covered in Mexico? And I was like, no. He's like, no, call him back.
It's legit how I started at Kevin's office. I used to work at his agency, and you just go on the phones, you pound away. And that's when we had, remember you had the GPS service? And so it was 3 dialer. So like, you're getting a hold of someone.
Right.
Like,
For
almost
sure.
every time. And
Right.
just so many like F-bombs thrown at me nonstop. And then finally you get one, right? And like Rebecca or Drew or Dean or whoever's like, they're like, hey, I got one. You want it? And then they ask about like the area where they're from and stuff like this. And then like sometimes they find out it's like not going to be a good lead. I'm like, well, I can do it. Kevin, let me do it. He's like, you're not licensed. You know what I mean? So I remember starting out and it was just like you, like, and it's funny. I was thinking, I wrote this down. I'm like, if Andrew did get fired, would he be here today with the mega agency sitting with us? Or would you still want to do insurance? Or do you think at that point you'd have been like, well, I'm going to do something else in business?
It's a great question that I haven't thought about. And it's probably something I probably should think about. I always try to find these things to reflect on. I think there's been 2 already. I think the answer is probably no. I probably wouldn't be in insurance. And I think that would have been, I would have said, hey, I'm going to take this as feedback that maybe this isn't for me. And I would have tried something different. And I do think that no matter what I would have decided to do, I probably would have ended up in entrepreneurship some way or another.
Sure.
It probably wouldn't have been insurance though. And if it had been insurance, it probably would have been something more niche than just general property and casualty. And so, and there's nothing wrong with property and casualty insurance. I love it now. I just think at 22 years old, I would have been like, my information set is calling business owners and this sucks. And I'm going to try something different, So I think it's a really good question for me to reflect on, Jeff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So when you flipped to the internet leads, did that turn to home and auto? did you stop calling on commercial and then flip to that?
So I was working at State Farm, specifically in Florida, and this
Yeah.
was 2013, 2014, maybe 2015, towards the end when I was doing this. And we only had auto insurance at that point. So it was very similar then to the way that it is in Florida now.
Right.
Is that auto insurance was really the only thing you could write. There was, home or fire, depending what you want to call it. But it was all going through the state program that was extremely expensive and people didn't really have options. Home or auto was pretty much it. And so we were only working auto insurance leads, which, I think in general is, there's a lot more people shopping for auto insurance online than home in general. But what we would do is once we started doing internet leads, once you kind of graduated out of that commercial spot, a lot of us would still do commercial cold calling from 8 a.m. to like maybe 9:30 a.m. when you could still kind of catch the business owner
Right.
in the office before they went out into the field. And the reason that we did that was because when you closed an auto insurance lead, maybe you get 1 or 2 cars. Sometimes you get 3 or 4, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's such a huge sale. On a commercial call, sometimes it's 20 vehicles
Right.
or 17 vehicles. And so this idea of how can we take an hour or 90 minutes a day to take some moonshots, because even if you just get one of those sales a month, it's huge. And so for the most, I'd say probably, 80 to 90% of the time was on the internet leads for auto, but still about 10 or 15% of the time calling commercial, which kept you sharp too.
Right. Yeah. I love when you figure out like what's hard, and then you realize like, man, internet leads so much easier. So here's the question: is you went to home and auto, you start doing the leads, and then you went to Ted Todd, but you created outbound. So was that not internet leads? Or
it was internet leads. And so I think the comparison point is that people who, when I came in, there was a lot of really talented, really seasoned, knowledgeable agents. I would call them straight up agents, people who could do both the service or the sales side. And the primary marketing methods were direct mail, which, worked pretty well in Florida at the time.
Right.
And then a lot of just general community marketing. And so the phone would ring. There was really no picking up the phone and making an outbound call, not even really to current clients who had one line or another. So, when we added the outbound piece in, it was internet leads, but you still had to pick up the phone and call them. And people thought that was super brutal, and trying to get a seasoned person who was used to, sitting with their hand out like a baby bird, getting it dropped in, trying to get somebody to do that was tough. And, when I took over the sales team in 2015, I think I inherited something like 15 salespeople.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget looking back, it was like 18 months later, we had just started to like really get traction, start setting, new agency records for sales. And we had 2 of those 15 people were able to adapt and join the team and do the outbound calls and close the leads and be a little bit more assertive to say, look, you need to have your insurance today. Don't come into the office. We don't need you to be in the office.
Right.
We can close this right over the phone for you. And so it took about 18 months to, turn that team over, get some of the seasoned people in different roles that were a better fit for their skill set in the agency.
Yeah.
And really the need to do the outbound piece in general was that the direct mail worked great. It really did. And so did the community marketing. We just couldn't get enough of it. It wasn't scalable.
Sure.
We couldn't get enough to grow. It was good for 200 to 300 items a month, but we couldn't get to the 500 or 600 that we needed to hit the year-end bonuses.
Yeah. So 2 of the 15 could do it, and then you added more that were fresh, no background, no preconceived notions of what you can and can't do.
Absolutely.
Right. And I can see how those moldable people would be a lot easier to convert, because to get someone to change their mindset, they're doing something one way. I mean, 2 out of 15, that sounds about right. I would thought might have been just 1 or none. Could have been possible.
Yeah.
So hard to flip them.
Yeah. And what I would say about the new people is, to bridge that gap, it's that people said, how did you do this for 18 months? And what we did was we created the outbound caller position. A lot of people call them telemarketers. If you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I never call them that. I call them sales development reps or business development reps.
Smart.
And because nobody aspires to be a telemarketer.
No, right.
Nobody aspires to be a telemarketer.
Worst job.
So we would bring people in, people who had no experience, were green, and we'd say, look, you're going to do this outbound caller role. And you're going to do it for 3 to 6 months while you get your license. And so what they would do is they'd call the leads, get them interested, and then they would transfer that call live to a sales rep. And so that was a way to get the call reluctance out. And we figured out that if somebody wasn't willing or able to do that job, you could find out in a week. You didn't have to wait,
For sure.
3 weeks to go through all the Allstate trainings and get their appointments and everything like that.
Yeah.
And spend, 3 weeks for the salary. You knew
Right.
on day 1 or 2 if they just weren't going to call. And we knew for a fact, if you will not call, you cannot win with us. If
Well,
you will call, you've got a shot. You might not be guaranteed,
Right.
but you at least are doing the minimum thing that you need to do. And then they would graduate into sales reps. And then over time, that's how the team just kind of turned.
Yeah.
and on the podcast with you and Nick Saka, the guy's awesome. He's a beauty.
Great guy.
You were really transparent on the podcast, and you said that didn't you have him do 6 hours a day on the phone?
We aim for 6 hours of talk time per day.
Wow.
And so then that's still today. That's still the key. Whether you're a sales rep or an outbound caller, we ideally want to see you on the phone for 6 hours a day. And
I love the conversation. Yeah, that's awesome. But then if they can't hit that, is there a certain number of calls you want them to make?
Really, the piece that we look at more than anything else is how many quotes did you do per day?
Okay.
I think what were your sales today? What were your calls today? What was your talk time today? I think those are all, KPIs that we can look at, but I think they are a little bit deceptive. I think people get so caught up in activity because they want people to say, look, if you're trying your best, you can win. And I think that's a good thing to do if you're an agency owner and your marketing's not in line or your technology's not set up for success,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you need to give people a way to win. You don't want people to be discouraged. But if you're saying, look, you made 200 calls today or you had this much talk time today, that's good enough. I reject that notion completely. That's on the agency owner or the leader to figure out why did they not have enough quotes? Because quotes correlate to sales at like 0.93. So if you double your quotes, you almost double your sales. If you double your calls or double your talk time, you don't double your sales. You're addressing the symptom, not the root cause of the problem. So if somebody's making 400 calls a day and they're getting 5 quotes, well, are they getting pickups and getting hung up on? Are they not able to overcome the objections? Are you being flagged as spam so people aren't even picking up the phone?
Mm-hmm.
Is it the marketing that you're calling? Is it a new lead that's hot? Well, if they're not getting the quotes, they're burning through a bunch of money. Is it an age lead or a list, right? Maybe you're spending a whole day and you didn't spend any money on the marketing, but time has a cost to it. So
Right.
quotes is what we look at more than anything. And if quotes aren't there, then we'll start to look at calls and talk time, because we say, look, if the quotes aren't there, is the activity there? Because we want to try to figure out what is the reason the quotes aren't there. It's not like, oh, well, the quotes weren't there, but they made enough calls. They tried. On to the next. That doesn't get us where we want to go.
Yeah. So, and then you're providing all the leads. I mean,
Correct.
they don't have to do any outbound cold calling of any sort. They're all following up on all the leads that you're providing.
Correct. There's nothing that's purely cold, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a good distinction that you're making, Kevin, is people say, look, I'm making outbound calls, I'm cold calling.
Yeah.
And what a cold call is there's no information, there's no relationship, there's no hand raising, there's nothing. So we don't do anything
Right.
cold as of today.
Yeah.
Every outbound call that we're making is on a warm lead. And the reason that we do that is because it's just, again, it's an opportunity cost function. We can call on something completely cold and the ROI would probably be through the roof, but the amount of production that we actually get will not be enough. And the trade-off would be better to spend some money and get more.
Right. So when you say spend some money, this is a big one because there's so many agents that feel they don't know where to start. I see the benefits, and I'm sure you do too, obviously, the agents that spend a lot of money and they think they can't afford to get into the game. They just can't afford to spend the money that Andrew spends or any other top agents in the country, a Jeremy Olson. I mean, they just
Right.
don't have the money. And what do you say to that?
The first thing I say is I think that's a limiting belief. And we all have limiting beliefs. I have limiting beliefs. I'm sure you two have limiting beliefs. And we have to challenge ourselves to say, look, that's a limiting belief and I don't accept it. And the reality can be is that, look, maybe Andrew can spend $50,000 or $60,000 a month on marketing, which is about what I'm spending right now. And I can only spend, $4,000 on marketing. So the question has to be is what is the best use of that $4,000? And the other part of the question has to be is, well, if I want to spend $10,000, what do I need to do to go from $4,000 to $10,000. And sometimes that says, look, I need to find a high ROI source on my $4,000, and then I can bring it up to 5,000, and then to 6,000, and then to 7,000. And what we always have to remind ourselves is, well, we have trade-offs. Well, if I take that money out of the bank and go buy myself a new watch, or I buy myself a new car, or I buy an investment property, well, that takes away from marketing or from staff. If I hire another service person or another salesperson, well, that's maybe money away from marketing. And if I, invest in marketing, that means I can't put that money somewhere else. We have trade-offs. And so the question becomes, with $4,000 or $5,000, how do we get started? And I think a lot of people have this tendency to say, look, I'm so busy, I'm going to put it in mail, or I'm going to put it in leads, or I'm going to put it in this. And they want to set it and forget it. And with marketing, you can't set it and forget it. You have to look at it, and you have to have a general strategy. And I think the other piece of it is that a lot of people go in expecting or hoping to get to a number, but they don't actually set what is the success criteria. So if I send out 10,000 pieces of mail, I want to know that I'm getting at least, a 0.75% response rate. And if I don't get that, that was a failure, or I might say, hey, I want to have at least an ROI of 150%, and that means that I have to get this much premium. And that means I have to get this many quotes to get that. Right. That means I have to get this many calls. And so I'm going through a lot of things here, but the key of I don't have enough money, I can't do it. I think the thing to always remember is that I didn't always spend $50,000 or $60,000 on marketing. I didn't always do that, and I probably won't always do that. There'll be times that I probably cut back and focus on profit a little bit more than growth. And something I always say when people talk to me about the amount of money we spend on marketing is that I have run at a loss all year. I have been in the red on my P&L all year, and that's because growth is expensive. I lose money every time at least in the short run, I lose money every time we make a sale. It takes 1.5 to 2 years to break even, and that's okay.
Sure.
Yep.
But growth costs money, and there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm going to focus on profit this year, refill the coffers, and then grow another. You can't grow endlessly forever. You just can't do it. That's why companies go get VC funding, is because growth costs money.
And then what year, though? Like, did you come out? The video games definitely helped, right?
Yeah.
But what year did you have? You had to. I'm assuming Ted Todd was, a good mentor and some other agents. But
for sure,
was
absolutely.
there times where you're like, should I be spending this, right? Or were you like full throttle, like, let's do it, right from the get go?
So, I'm an incredibly frugal guy, and so when we spend money, I want to know that the money is not just, it's not just like, whatever, throw 30 grand at internet leads.
Yeah.
It's going to be, hey, we have a target cost per item of $65. Let's measure hard against that, and let's figure that out. And so, we have discussion, the amount of times that we sometimes spend discussing, should we increase our budget 10%, which might be $4,000 or $5,000 a month. The amount of time is almost stupid when we think about it. But I think it's just about the general frameworks and the values that we carry in the organization, is that we don't spend money here just to spend money, because every time you just waste money willy-nilly, it takes away from something else. And I always tell people is that I've really delayed a lot of taking of profits, so to speak, is that we've kept a lot of money in the business, which I think is a huge way that we've been able to grow. And so I always look and say, man, should we be spending $43,000 on internet leads, knowing we have another, 5 over here and 8 over here, and this telemarketing team and this and that. So I'm always asking that question. It's like, should we be spending that much? And then there's also the other part of me that's like, but what if we spent another 10? What would we get? And how realistic is that? And does that make sense? And is that worth it?
Yeah.
So always.
That's great. So that agent, again, who's considering, they're listening, they understand, they know, they want to get to 50,000. They're at 3,000 right now. And maybe they want to double to 6, or maybe even a brand new agent. How much time should they, or set money aside, right? Because it's not just 1 month. You won't get your money back in 1 month. There's a lag time to it, right? As it catches up and it works through. So would you say that's, 60, 90 days, 120? Like, you can't try 1 month and stop, is my point.
Testing things out.
And I'd just love to hear your feedback on how long they need to let it work through.
I think a lot of people default to you got to give anything 90 days. And I think that's a good start. You got to give things enough time. And that's certainly an element is, if we think about the sales cycle of insurance, sometimes people will buy on the first call or the first day. And then sometimes they wait 3 to 4 weeks, wait for their renewal, or they go out and shop more. Right. And so if you think about the sales cycle, what we've seen over our data over multiple years is that the average time from quote to bind average is roughly 17 to 18 days. Median is like 11. There's plenty of people that bind again on the first call. There's plenty of people who bind on the 45th day, so to speak, or even, mid-cycle. But you've got to give it some time. You got to give it 60 to 90 days to let everything flow through. First 30 days are always going to look really rough, just always. And so I think sometimes people see that, they get discouraged, and they give up. They say, this isn't working. I'm going to bail. You've got to give it time. So I think that's the first piece of it. The second and more important piece is you need to make sure you have a big enough sample size. So if you go 90 days, but you've only bought 100 leads,
right?
100 is not a good sample. 300 is okay. 1,000 is even better. And I know that's not always realistic, but I always tell people at least try to get a sample. If you can get 100, awesome. If you can get 300, better. If you can get 500 to 1,000, perfect. But get as big of a sample as you can over 90 days before you give up on something. So if you're asking this question of how much dry powder should I have, in the account so I can spend money, at least 90 days is what I would recommend. And I think the other thing I would say is take the marketing budget that you have. Say you have $3,000 today and you're doing direct mail. Well, just know that that's what you're doing as your baseline. Then how can you generate another $1,000 or $2,000 of revenue in your agency that you can then reinvest back into marketing? And so some of the ways that you can do that, if you're the agent, I think everyone's going to be like, is sell some life insurance. The way that a lot of like the veteran agents out there that I've learned from said, look, the way I grew my agency is I ran at break even or loss. And the way that I made my salary was by selling life insurance. That was my take home. So that's an easy one. And people will probably say I'm a corporate shill because of that, because that's all corporate seems to be talking about in every single captive company, whether it's Farmers, State Farm, or Allstate. That's the first one. The second one, especially if you're an Allstate agent. If you're an Allstate agent, this is a slam dunk. Work your monoline book. If you have an auto policy and you cross-sell that home, you're going to get paid 37%. You can very quickly see that you can generate a lot of money very quickly. And if you've already been drilling your book, well, then you might have to go to life insurance. But monoline is a great way to generate some capital very quickly. A third one is, again, if you're the business owner, even if you don't want to be in the business, I get that everyone says I want to work on the business, not in the business. And people say, Andrew, you don't work in the business. That's wrong. I do. I don't do it all the time, but I do it when I need to. And so, like, for instance, something I'm working on is driving benefits cases, because that can generate another $5, $10, $15, $20,000 of revenue here or there. And business owner to business owner can have a lot of clout. So this idea is definitely save up. 90 days is good. Make sure your sample size, but also think about how you can get creative to generate an extra $1,000 or $2,000 of revenue that you can reinvest back in. It compounds and snowballs pretty quickly.
So good. The thing, sorry, I'm capitalizing this just because I can so relate.
Right. It's awesome.
But I mean, to our listeners and our viewers, like, there's so much content that you're giving them in just real life, and like, this is exactly the formula of how to do it. And I love it. And success is going to be equal to your quotes times your close ratio, right? That's
Absolutely.
That's your sales. And so you're feeding a lot of quotes, and they got the quotes. Now, to an agent who says, I'm spending a lot of money and my close ratio is down, it's probably in the word tracks that they're using. As salespeople, that's our tools, our toolbox. And if you've got a little tiny toolbox, little tools for your word tracks, you're not going to do very well. So what do you focus on when you're calling back that lead? Are there some key things that you always want to hit? Because you must be getting a better close ratio than most, just overall.
So to ask for clarification on that question, are you saying a lead before we've quoted it, or a one that we have quoted that we're now trying to close?
First time, like, you internet lead comes in and you're calling back like, hey, Andrew, I saw you're interested in an auto quote. Like, what are some of the things inside of that create stickiness, close ratio, and...
Got it.
Yeah.
So we always teach our people to never ask a question. never ask a question that invites a no. So and never make an assumption either. So we might say, hey, I saw you were shopping for an auto insurance or home quote. Well, the customer can come back and say, no, I wasn't. Or, hey, are you interested? No, I'm not interested. So we try to present, the conversation in a way that says, hey, this is Andrew from Peachy Insurance. I have an auto quote here prepared for you. We want to share it. And they might say, and a lot of times they go silent and they go, okay. Or they give us an objection. And if they say, okay, we say, look, perfect, and whether it's the salesperson calling themselves, which they don't do a lot, but they do call a little bit. Or if it's the salesperson themselves, say, perfect, I'm just going to confirm a few pieces of information that I have to make sure that the discounts that I gave you are accurate. I don't want to give you a price, have it change. We don't do bait and switch here. People are like, yeah, good. No bait and switch. Everyone's afraid of bait and switch. If it's the caller who's going to transfer, they say, hey, we work in teams here, and I actually have my senior agent, working on this. They just want to confirm a few pieces to make sure the discounts they're giving you are valid and that your price is accurate. And then we go right into it. If they give us an objection, and I actually made a post on LinkedIn about this yesterday, is that I think the biggest mistake that people make when they're prospecting, trying to get somebody to engage with them in a conversation, is they hear an objection and everyone's like, well, how do I overcome the objection? How do I create a rebuttal to that rejection? Yeah. And it's the wrong way to think about it. You have to think about, instead of how do I acknowledge their objection or their challenge, how do I acknowledge and make them feel heard? I know that sounds so new age, and but you got to make them feel like you're actually listening to them. So acknowledge their objection or their challenge, then empathize with it. Say, hey, totally understand where you're coming from. I'm slammed at work too. I know you're super busy. And then you align and overcome. So we say, look, how about I make this easy for you? If you just let me confirm 4 things and get permission to quote, I can have this done for you. And if I'm saving you money, I'll call you back later this evening. And that way I don't waste your time when you're so busy. Yeah. So acknowledge the challenge, empathize and align with it, and then overcome, aka find a win-win, something that works for you and works for them. People want to feel like they're being collaborated with. How many arguments do we have in our personal lives every single day?
Oh, yeah.
A ton. The last thing we want to do is argue with somebody on a sales call. Right. It's just not worth it. You just hang up. So that's what I always say.
And really good. I just feel like the buying behavior has changed over the years.
Absolutely.
And I think you're hitting it with this. I mean, acknowledge, don't sound like a typical salesperson. Your approach, that's very clever.
I've been to a lot of therapy.
Yeah, I'm just literally confirming a couple pieces of information. Why wouldn't you? To get a better price. And then, of course, empathize and overcome. I mean, I think of talking to agents every single day. And agents are very smart. They're good salespeople. So
absolutely,
they can sense a sales call right away. So you definitely need to feel, you got to show it that it's authentic and you're different than the typical random person calling. And these steps are really good. You got some really good notes here.
Yeah. One thing I want to throw out. So Kevin, you said something that I'll actually myth bust a little bit. You said, I'm sure your close rate is a lot higher than other people. And, it's funny because when I do consulting with other agents and I dive into their close rates, our close rate is actually significantly lower than a lot of other people. And so I think a lot of people have a lot less at bats, but hit at a much higher rate. We just have so many at bats. We just do so many quotes.
That makes sense.
That we're getting there. I always say it's less finesse and more sheer, like just brute force.
Yeah.
We're just pushing on it all the time.
Yeah, and I do get that, because if you're just dealing with referrals, you look at us, we're at 50% close ratio.
Small community.
Yeah, you only tried 10 times.
And
so totally get that. And I was just kind of thinking more related, like someone who's doing a lot of quotes. But yes, that's really important, that the same kind of quotes. And what you hit on was really important too, because as a business owner myself, I get inundated with people trying to sell me stuff, right?
For sure.
Just last week, I get this email that said, hey, I was looking at your website and I see a way that we can make it look better. And there's some real opportunity. Can I share what I did for you? And that's exactly
it's already done.
Thing.
Yeah.
And so random that I actually even took the response. I said, yeah, I was kind of like this. Well, yeah, sure. Like, you already mocked up my website. Yeah, I'll take that. And then, of course, that's the lead, and it goes to the guy. And then he did. Like I ended up on my calendar, and I take it, and I'm like, yeah, well, why don't you just show me? I'm kind of like this, just show it to me then. And
Yeah.
he did. And he had some really good stuff in there. And
That's
so to
that's
your
the
point,
key.
yeah, like that was a really good point. And he got me, and I say no to a lot of things. So that's great. I mean, that's true.
It's about being relevant, timely, and valuable, right? And so he was
Yeah.
timely, relevant, and then he added value. And it was
Yeah.
extremely little lift for you. All you had to do is just kind of say, okay. He made it
Right.
easy, right? And if you think about, I'm a huge fan of just like cold email and messaging in general. And it's this idea of how do you give somebody the easiest possible way to say yes
Yeah.
and then add value? It's almost like just value dump. Just do it. Just value dump.
Yeah. That's great. Good stuff.
Let's talk a little bit about your recruiting. I mean, you got to have you mentioned you had 15 people and 2 of them transferred in, right? I feel like some agents would be like, oh, like I'm going to give up on recruiting, right? What's your strategy there? And like with you, do you treat recruiting like everyone's a profit center? What's your mindset there?
Starting to treat everybody like it's a profit center. I think sales has always been a profit center. Customer service, not so much. I looked at it as a cost center for a long time. Just tried to maintain the cost, keep the cost as low as possible. Now, over on the customer service side, how can I get production or revenue out of that service team? And I think a lot of people are trying to turn their service team into a sales team, and that's okay. That's a strategy. It's not the strategy that I'm going with. The way that I look at my sales team is that they are here to bring in new business to grow the book. And I want to look at my service team as how do we increase the lifetime value of the customers that we have? And the way that you increase lifetime value is that you increase the amount of money they spend with you, AKA their total household spend, by adding more coverages, more lines, whatever.
Right.
Or you get them to stay longer. Ideally, you do both, but one or the other works. It creates a lot of value over time. And I think people don't realize how much it does. So now everything's profit center. Now, recruiting on the other side is that we always have our job ads open, always, never close them. We're fully remote, other than maybe like the mandated one person in the office that we have to have. So those 2 things get us a lot of applicants. From there, we have a few mechanisms of how we sort through them. But something that I try to do is I do try to make sure that we at least talk to everybody. And people say, well, how do you do that? How do you spend the time? And there's a couple little, like what I would call like gates or checkpoints that people have to go through. One, they have to answer, just some general questions. Like, are you willing to make on the job application for sales says, are you willing to make 300 to 500 outbound calls per day? And, that's, if it's the outbound caller role or the SDR role, that is, it's a must. It must be yes. Because if the answer is no, you're not going to be able to do it. If they are for the sales role, it says, are you licensed? And then if they say no, the question is, are you willing to get your license before you start? We will help you pay for it. And so we do not allow anyone to start without a license. It's, in my opinion, a waste of money. And I can't tell you how many people I've had come in, work for a month while they look for another job and then don't get their license and move on. And so
with the exception
that's just kind
of
of
the SDR,
big picture.
right?
Yeah.
With the exception of the SDR, right? Because you're kind of grooming.
Correct.
Which totally get it. Yeah. But me too. My whole career, not one time, 15 years, hire a licensed rep without, it's fine. And I only hired people with license, I think 3 times. Like I preferred that empty blank slate to be able to create their own vision and the expectations of what they are instead of them limiting it.
It's hard to find a superstar who's already licensed and experienced because usually if they're a superstar, their agent is paying them well enough so they don't leave because they're worth it, or they're interested in becoming an agency owner because if they can do it for somebody else, a lot of times people say, why not do it for myself? And that's not everybody. Not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur or doesn't want to be an entrepreneur right now. Maybe they do in a few years, but not right now. And so to your point, there's that. And, when we sift through people, right, there's those questions, but we also use an assessment, which basically we say, look, you got to take this assessment. Well, maybe 60 or 70% of people even do the assessment. Then we say the assessment has to come back valid because if you go too fast or you BS it comes back invalid. So that probably narrows the path down or the pool from like, by 50, it culls the herd by 50%. Then we'll say, hey, why don't you get on a 15-minute kind of like pre-screen recruiting call? Well, maybe half of that half that's left actually schedule a call. And so if you have 100 applicants, maybe 20 get on that 15-minute call. And then within usually within 5 minutes, really, we can decide how they sound on the phone. We're usually hearing more than anything. Do they just sound good on the phone? Do they sound like somebody that we would want to talk to if we were a client? Or do they sound like they're laying in bed or they're monotone or they have
Right.
no
Hi,
energy or anything?
Andrew. Darth
You know?
Vader. Yeah.
So, of those 20, maybe 5 get passed into the actual interview funnel.
Yeah.
So that's our process.
Great. And then any other software you use along with recruiting besides an assessment? What assessment is it that you
So
use?
we use 2 pieces of software. We use Criteria Corp
Okay.
and we use Greenhouse Recruiting.
Okay. Gotcha. And what does Greenhouse do for you?
Greenhouse is, I guess, what you would call an applicant management system. So it allows you to get them in, get the resume, move them to the next stage, hire, reject. I imagine it's like a CRM for recruiting.
ATS.
It's
Right.
probably the best comparison we can make.
What do you, if you don't mind sharing, what do you pay monthly for both of them combined monthly, do you think?
I know Criteria Corp's like $300 a month. Greenhouse, I don't know. I'd venture to say both of them are under $700 total, but
$700 a month.
I'll have to get back to you on that.
No,
No, you're
cool.
good.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, this would be fun. So this is probably our 15th episode.
Okay.
We haven't sold our set one time. You could listen to all of them. But as far as
Well, it's kind of cool.
Platform,
He doesn't use us, and
No,
most
I
of the
know.
viewers, besides like our
Right.
celebrities,
but
that
I'm
have
going
been
to put
on.
you on the spot right now.
Yeah, no, like it's funny. He's like, he doesn't use us, and like I'm
Right.
just thinking all the money that he would save. Not only,
Yeah.
I believe we'd provide more value.
Right.
So it's
Well,
gonna
as a
be
frugal
exciting.
guy, I like what you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Well, it's like
That's where we have to do another podcast after, and Andrew's gonna be like, "This is how I used it. This is how I implemented
Right.
it."
But even all of our clients that are listening now, they're paying a fraction of that with all combined and more. So I want to do something fun here, something different we've never done.
What are you
And
gonna
just Andrew, I'm going to have you rate, and Jeff, I'm going to put you on the spot. You're going to give him an elevator pitch.
do?
Based
I don't
on
like
his,
elevator pitches.
Well, then okay, then give him. What would you say to him? Pretend this is a call.
Well, I take those numbers, and oddly enough, we were actually talking about this before the podcast. I'm someone who's so passionate about Ideal Trades. I've been working here for so long, Andrew. I've been with the company 9 years. Would have left a while ago if the product didn't work, right? And so with all of our customers, the benefits of them using us is it's just an all-in-one insurance-specific platform. So you or Katrina would log into the software. You can easily post a job ad like you would on Indeed and ZipRecruiter. We're gonna go out to all those sites for you. You can use our templates. And then as applicants apply, the assessment's automatically being sent. It's going to have your logo. It's going to be branded to Andrew, Filar, Allstate Agency, whatever your business name is. As candidates are taking this assessment, now you can see, just like what you were saying before, let's see that completion rate. Who actually took it? And now who is going to be a good fit for your sales team, your SDR team, your customer service team? And we have all that information, easy to understand. The first thing we would have you do is send it to your whole staff and see how we can duplicate your top producers, right? And make sure you're giving you help on managing your team and having a better culture. The final stage is obviously just like Greenhouse. We have those email templates in place. We have all that for you. And then we have the one-way video interview that you can send out, and it can replace your phone screen interview. And now people can take that before they put the kids to bed.
Yeah.
How tough is it to get a hold of someone who's a really good candidate? It's tough. And trying to get on your schedule so they can do it after work and they send you a video, and now you can see all those things that you mentioned. Do they have a good voice? Can they present well? Are they confident? Those are the things you're going to understand, and it's just all through one platform.
So given what I've talked about with my process, right? So it sounds like you can save me money. Sounds like you can save me time.
Yes.
What do you think is the number one benefit of Ideal Trades for my specific situation?
That's easy. The number one, I would say the assessment. I don't know your assessment, but I'd imagine it's not specific to this industry. I'd imagine that it's not as, because we just work with so many agents where we know what they're looking for, right? So we put a lot of time, energy, effort into making it super easy to understand, super easy for the candidate to take, and the agent experience and the candidate experience is very good. But then for you, the ease of use. I mean, it's all in one platform. So I'd imagine you're posting ads, then you're using this ATS. So you're logging into 2 different sites there. Then Corp, I'm not going to be Criteria Corp. Okay.
Yeah.
And now you're logging into another software. So how much time is that? And wouldn't it be nice if everything was in one?
Yeah. So like we say, I love to
Wait,
say
wait.
that we're
Would you like that on your Amex or your Visa?
Hey,
Go
there
for
you
the
go.
close. There it is.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
But,
totally down to try it. I'm totally
Yeah.
down to try it and kind of do some case studies here.
Yeah. And I love to just say it's a 4-in-1 solution. Like a lot of companies will do 1 or maybe 2 of these things. You have 3 different companies that each do one thing. And the 4-in-1 is post a job ad to 100 boards, a 4-part assessment with problem solving, short answer questions, and a personality profile. And then it's applicant tracking. And then it's the one-way video interviewing. And so you probably would be shocked, but per rooftop, that all-in-one solution for an Allstate agent is
$950 right now.
$950 annual, and it's unlimited on everything, 5 job ads.
Now the pricing's interesting, right? Because like, let's just say a smaller Allstate agent that's hiring one person,
Yep.
they'll still see the value because one hire is worth $950. I don't think many agents could argue that if they work out well. But with you, you're hiring multiple people, so you just take
Absolutely.
even more advantage. But that's the beauty of it.
The thing that I love the fact is you see the value in spending money in recruiting. It's just a part of your budget. You have a recruiting budget
Yeah.
that you spend. You spend $700 a month, and that's not uncommon. There are other businesses and companies that do that as well. But you just like leads, like you have to spend
Absolutely.
money to grow. You have to get off your wallet. You can't go buy the new car because you got your year-end bonus. Like you got to spend it if you want to grow.
Recruiting is just sales. And I think that piece that you just said is just like leads, right? Recruiting is just sales. And I think if more agents looked at recruiting the way they look at new business acquisition, it would help a lot of people with their hiring process in general.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, we don't have too much time left, but I definitely want to talk about Next Call Club because I'm
Sure.
curious. I've had a couple agents tell me about it, but can you now give maybe the elevator pitch or just talk about how you're helping agents and providing them with value?
Sure. So what I would say is that Next Call Club is meant to be a consulting or business services arm of really an extension of me and my business partners in my process. And so a lot of people say, look, you guys have these processes figured out. You're able to do it at scale. Can you help me with it too? And so after enough time, we finally said, let's create a business around this. And we wanted to create something that was, unique in the marketplace and also valuable at the same time. So I got a lot of feedback. People said, I don't want another video trainer. I don't have time for it. They said, I don't want something that requires a lot of work for me. And so that's how we came up with Next Call Club. And we do 3 things. First thing we do is one-to-one agency consulting. And so typically that's an agent who's, past the 5 million mark. Maybe they're around like 6 or 7.
Okay.
Or maybe they're in the teens. I think I work with a bunch of agents who are in like kind of like the 10 to 20 million range, and they're trying to get their organization structured to scale, to buy a big agency and continue growth. Because a lot of people buy an agency, a lot of them overpay, and then they've doubled in size, and they're getting just smacked around by the whirlwind that comes from that type of growth. So one-to-one agency consulting, I do financial breakdowns, marketing, help them rebuild processes, everything. And the idea is, how do we get your business ready for rapid growth and scaling? That's one-to-one consulting. The next thing we have is the lead buying service. And so we buy for our agency alone, probably 10 to 12,000 leads per month. And we use something like 6 to 7 pieces of technology to weed out the bad leads and get the good leads. And so what we do is we act as a middleman between you and the lead company. We have relationships with all the big ones, and it's a one-to-one pass-through. So basically what we're doing is we're providing analytics on your lead buy, telling you where to target, what to get less of, what to get more of. And you're using our technology. So that could be Journia, Verisk. We have phone verification. There's 7 or 8 different checkpoints. And this idea is, how do we get you the best quality lead, not only from a targeting standpoint, but from a consumer intent standpoint, and ideally do it for cheaper than what you could do on your own. And so just to kind of make it a little bit easier down to earth is you go to a lead company, maybe they tell you it's $8 to $10 for a lead, and they give you a choice between, preferred, premium, or standard.
Sure.
And it's all just kind of pre-built filter sets. Well, throw all that away. You can mix and match anything you want. Plus, before you get the lead, you can make sure, did they actually fill out this form? Did they spend a couple minutes filling out the form, or was it 6 seconds? Do 10 agents have this lead, or do 3 agents have this lead? Is their phone actually valid? Like, is it in service? If it is in service, is it actively receiving and making phone calls, or is it a landline that just hasn't rang in 8 months? So we are a pass through. Think of it like we're a bridge between you and the lead company. You use our technology so you don't have to spend the $40,000 to $50,000 a month that we do on these technology platforms. The last thing we do, which is probably the most popular, and we actually have a wait list right now, but we'll still talk to people if they want to get on the wait list, is we do US based outbound calling as a service. And so it's fully turnkey. We recruit, hire, equip, onboard, and train US based outbound callers to call your leads and send live transfers to your salespeople, just like they do in our agency. And we have a few agents who are just really crushing it right now. Like one is a guy by the name of Wyatt Mace. I know that he's done a great job of getting his name out there. I just sent him a text this morning. He had 2 callers going last week with us, and on every single day, those 2 callers exceeded 45 transfers.
Wow.
Dang.
2 people, 45 transfers. And on Monday last week, they got like 63 with 2 people. So there's a lot of outbound calling companies out there. A lot of them are offshored or nearshored, or maybe they're even in the US. But what makes us different is we provide the training, we provide the outbound calling, just consulting in general, spam remediation, call cadence strategy, contact strategy. We do some stuff inside the agency as well, marketing strategy. So look at us as like a business services or a consulting arm. And what I always tell people is, look, even if you don't want to use us or buy from us, but you need help, hit me up. I'm happy to help on LinkedIn, on email. I have a newsletter, all the things.
Hey, on the last thing you said, are they buying who's buying the lead? They're calling on leads, so they buy the leads, and then
they are their leads. Yes.
First call, and then at what point do you transfer? How much information do they get?
So what they're mainly doing is they're going to confirm a couple pieces of information, and that's really more than anything just a stall to get the salesperson on the line. And then it's just a warm handoff. Hey, I've got Kevin on the line. He's going to go ahead and confirm those discounts for you. He'll take it from here. That caller drops off and just keeps going.
Perfect.
So it's their leads. We lease that employee to you. So it's a cost plus contract. So it's wages, plus the cost of our service fee. But it's their leads. It's their phone system. We do that to make sure it's fully TCPA compliant, that we're all in bounds, that, there's no issues on compliance with any of the companies, whether it's Allstate, Farmers, Independent, et cetera.
That's awesome. Real quick, technology. What do you use for your phones?
We are on 5.9. So, we are an Allstate agency. And so eventually we will be on Allstate's phone system, which I know is a little controversial, but I know that they're working very hard. I know a lot of the people at corporate who are on that team, and they're smart and talented people. And I think the job they have is very hard. I think at the same time, a lot of the concerns and gripes and issues that agents are having are extremely valid. And so I think it's just a tough situation all around, but I am on 5.9 right now. But I won't be forever.
Mm-hmm. Right. And does that, I'm not familiar with that one, but if a lead comes in, would it auto dial them immediately to be able to?
So not quite. It's click to call. And so what you do is, whether you're on Lead Manager, whether you're on Ricochet, whether you're on, Agency Zoom, what we can do is, and what we do, I shouldn't say what we can do. What we do is we set up a call cadence. And so it's just a set of rules on the back end that says, hey, when a lead comes in, it becomes eligible. It goes to the top of this list. You call it, and then it doesn't become eligible for another 30 minutes. So it kind of disappears, and then 30 minutes later, it reappears, and it's click to call. So it's not an auto dialer. It is click to call. And, I think power dialer is probably the better term of what a lot of things out there are, and you just got to always just always got to be careful with the term auto dialer and
right.
the ATDS and how the FCC and Supreme Court, look at the definition of that. So
No, yeah, I know that all too well. We sold software, the
Yep.
GPS software, for a while, and then when the new rules came out, it's like, you know what, we're not looking to get in any trouble.
brutal.
Here.
I mean, there's a lot of changes. I think right now there was like the bombshell one, first party versus third party consent, and I think some people are like it's going to kill the lead industry, and other people are like it's not going to do anything. And I think it'll be fine. I think there's a technology solution that will update the end buyer in real time, and I think it'll all work out great.
Yeah, I think it could ultimately really benefit you, the agent,
And the consumer, yeah.
ultimately. Yeah.
Well, guys, I know
Agreed.
Kevin can
So-
just go on and on with Andrew right now. We went overtime today, which is just a great thing because that just means Andrew brought so much value on this podcast
Tons.
episode. Can't
Yes.
thank you enough. And listeners out there, reach out to this guy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
literally, you can find him on Facebook, LinkedIn, message him. Even if you're like at a point where you're like, I can't spend money, let him just talk to you about some things. Maybe
Yeah.
a new vision, new concept to learn and understand. And Kevin, if he's not signed up for Ideal Traits by next month, you can fire me because I know how much he's going to
It's
benefit.
recorded.
And I know he's going to be a hard guy to get hold of. But
Yeah.
Now
I'm
I have
just
to
saying.
blackmail you because I know that
Yeah.
you've got a lot at stake here.
Oh, yeah. Equity stake. Oh, my God. Probably shouldn't have said that. But, when I'm in on something, I'm in
Oh,
on it
yeah.
as a
Right.
salesperson. And
We're
when I
gonna
know
do it.
something's that good of a fit,
Yeah.
right? Just like Andrew when he's selling his insurance policies. So, again, thanks so much, man. And anything else that you want to add before we
No,
let
I
you
think
go?
I'll just reemphasize what you said. If you're listening and you want to chat, reach out. You can
Yeah.
find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, the newsletter. Shoot me an email. And I'm happy to chat. I've gotten
Cool.
so much help in my career. So many people have given me what I would call free advice, free mentorship that, I'm happy to pay that forward. So seriously, always reach out.
Love it, man.
So good. Thank you so much. And agents
thank
need
you,
it.
guys.
And then get rid of that limiting belief that you
Absolutely.
can't
That's the
do
biggest takeaway right there.
anything. And you can only achieve what you put your mind to, what you think you can achieve, because you're going to be right either way, good or bad or
100%.
indifferent. And we just learned in the last one that, worrying about what it might look like or thinking of bad things is just a poor use of your imagination.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Again. Great
Thanks
stuff.
again, Andrew. Take it
All right,
easy.
thanks.